Have you ever felt your day crumble because of a single comment, an unexpected setback, or a glance from someone else that made you question yourself? It's almost like these small external things have a power over us, making us feel small, unsettled, and vulnerable. But imagine, just for a moment, a life where none of this, no insult, no judgment, no unexpected change, could shake you. A state where you stand solid, like a rock in the middle of a storm, unmoved by the chaos around you. What if the secret to this unshakable peace was hidden in ancient wisdom, waiting for you to unlock it? For centuries, the Stoic philosophers have offered timeless guidance on how to live a life that's truly within our control, unaffected by the whims of the outside world. Today, we delve into these teachings through 7 powerful principles inspired by Epictetus, a master of Stoic thought, that can help you build a mental fortress so that nothing, yes, nothing, can truly affect you. But here's the thing. Stoicism is not just a philosophy to learn, it's a path to walk. It's a choice to embrace strength over sensitivity, clarity over confusion, and peace over panic. As we explore these principles, meet Leo, a man caught between the pressures of his daily life and the Stoic wisdom that could set him free. Through Leo's journey, let us discover how each of these principles can empower us, not only to survive life's storms, but to thrive in them. Stay with me until the end, because by the time we reach the last principle, you might just find yourself with a renewed sense of strength and freedom that makes the rest of life's challenges seem small by comparison. Principle 1. Guard the sanctity of your mind. Would you let a stranger enter your house without your permission to stay as long as they like, rummaging through your most private things? This is the question Leo found himself asking one late evening, exhausted from the day's tensions. He was irritated by the dismissive tone his colleague had used in front of their team, the cutting words still lingering in his mind hours after the incident. No matter how hard he tried to push the thought away, it crept back, bringing frustration and insecurity along with it. Leo's story might sound familiar. After all, who hasn't had a negative comment or slight gesture haunt them, replaying over and over in their minds? This is a trap many of us fall into, a mental invasion we unknowingly allow. But what if we stopped? What if we could guard our minds with the same vigilance we use to guard our homes? In Stoicism, Epictetus warns us that our minds, much like our homes, should be treated as sacred spaces. Imagine if, every time someone said something hurtful, you could simply close the door to your mind and say, "Not welcome." The principle here is simple yet profound. Protect your mind from unwanted guests. But how? Think of your mind as a fortress where only thoughts and perspectives that empower you are allowed. As Leo began to practice this, he visualized each unwelcome thought as a trespasser at the gates, ready to be turned away. At first, it was difficult. He realized he'd spent years allowing these intrusions without a second thought. But with practice, he started to notice the freedom that came with mentally blocking out these negative voices. One day, Leo found himself in a tense meeting where his ideas were openly criticized. Normally, this would have thrown him off for hours, if not days. But instead of dwelling on it, he chose to guard his mental peace. He reminded himself that only he could decide the weight of others' words, and that he was under no obligation to let them linger in his mind. This shift in perspective gave him an immediate sense of calm. He felt unburdened, like someone who had finally shut the door to a long unwanted guest. So, here's the question for you. How often do you let unwanted thoughts settle into your mind without question? Do you allow external judgments to occupy your mental space, cluttering it with doubt and negativity? Perhaps it's time to be more selective about who and what you let in. To practice this principle of Stoicism, Start by identifying thoughts that don't serve you. Next time you're criticized or face a frustrating situation, visualize the thought at the edge of your mind, standing at the gates, and consciously decide whether it's allowed in. This practice may be challenging at first, as it was for Leo, but over time you'll find yourself more at peace, less affected by the judgments and negativity of others. As Leo found out, the mind can be a powerful ally or a persistent adversary. The choice is yours. Will you continue to leave the doors open to all intrusions, or will you guard it like the sacred place it deserves to be? And if this first principle resonated, let's journey further, for there's more wisdom waiting to make you truly unshakable. Principle 2. Embrace insults as neutral events. Imagine this. You're at work, presenting an idea you've poured hours into, and just as you're finishing, someone laughs. It's a quiet laugh, almost a smirk, but it's enough to pierce through your confidence like a sharp needle. Leo found himself in this exact position one day. He had just pitched a project he believed would add real value to the company, but his supervisor's dismissive chuckle left him feeling smaller, less certain. It's incredible, isn't it? How a single reaction, one person's opinion, can make us question ourselves so deeply. Have you ever been there? Have you ever felt your self-worth plummet from a single comment? Stoicism teaches us that this reaction, this emotional spiral, is entirely within our control. But how? Epictetus, in his wisdom, reminds us that insults and criticisms are not inherently harmful. The harm comes from our own interpretation, the weight we choose to give them. After that meeting, Leo was haunted by his supervisor's reaction. He found himself running through the scenario again and again, each time feeling a fresh wave of irritation and self-doubt. He couldn't shake the thought, why did he laugh? Was my idea that ridiculous? And yet, as he read more about Stoicism, a different thought emerged. What if that laugh was just a laugh? This perspective shift seemed almost too simple, but Leo decided to try it. The next time he encountered criticism, he tried to view it as a neutral event, like rain on a window. He reminded himself, an insult only has the power you give it. Leo realized that his emotional discomfort was not caused by the insult itself, but by his decision to make it personal. So the next time you find yourself feeling insulted or judged, ask yourself, is this reaction necessary? Are you assigning more meaning to the event than it deserves? What would happen if you simply observed it without taking it to heart? Leo's moment of clarity came when a friend casually criticized his choice of lifestyle. Normally, he would have defended himself, explaining why he was right to live as he did. But that day, he simply acknowledged the comment and let it slide past him, as though it had no weight. And here's the interesting part. In doing so, he felt a freedom he hadn't experienced in years. By not reacting, by seeing the criticism as neutral, he realized that he had deprived it of any power over him. This approach to insults may sound too detached, but that's precisely where Stoicism derives its strength. It doesn't ask you to ignore reality. It invites you to see reality with clear, unclouded eyes. Every insult, every judgment is simply a moment passing by, a cloud in the sky. You get to choose whether you want to reach out, grasp it, and make it part of you, or let it float away untouched and unclaimed. In time, Leo found himself less reactive, less troubled by the judgments of others. He learned that his worth wasn't tied to the opinions swirling around him. His confidence no longer depended on the validation of those around him. And as he embraced this Stoic mindset, he became someone whose peace couldn't be easily shaken. Now, let me ask you, what would it look like if you applied this principle? Could you allow a passing criticism to stay just that, a passing moment instead of a personal attack? Try it, even just once. Next time you feel hurt by someone's words, pause and ask yourself if you must give them the power to affect you. If this resonates with you, then let's keep moving forward. There are deeper insights awaiting, lessons that will further fortify your sense of self, making each external judgment seem smaller, less significant. Principle 3. Act according to your principles. Leo's journey into Stoicism took a challenging turn when he began making decisions that went against the expectations of others around him. One evening, as he reviewed his goals for the future, he realized that many of his choices, his career path, his interests, even his friendships, had been influenced by what he thought would earn him respect, approval, and even admiration. But in living to please others, he drifted far from his own values, his own sense of purpose. Have you ever felt the same, that you're making choices not for yourself, but for the image others might hold of you? Imagine how freeing it would be to live guided only by your inner compass, to act confidently even if it meant standing alone. Epictetus teaches us that the greatest freedom lies in following our own principles, unmoved by popular opinion. Stoicism encourages us to act in ways that align with our deepest values, irrespective of the judgments or misunderstandings of others. Leo realized that he could choose to live according to his values or continue bending to the expectations around him. And so, he chose to change. Shortly afterward, Leo decided to pursue a career in an unconventional field that resonated deeply with him. His family and friends, however, were skeptical. They questioned his decision, hinting that he was making a mistake and wasting his talents. This backlash hit hard, and Leo felt the familiar pull of wanting to fit in, to choose a safer path. But he remembered Epictetus's advice. If your actions are aligned with your values, why should you fear others' wrong judgments? To stand by his choice, Leo reminded himself that his happiness didn't depend on their approval. Instead, it depended on how true he was to his own ideals. His friends might not understand, his family might disapprove, but his sense of integrity was unwavering. For Leo, this was a breakthrough. He started making decisions based on his internal sense of right and wrong, not on what others would think. Consider your own life for a moment. How many of your choices are guided by your values, and how many are shaped by a desire to conform or gain approval? Leo's experience shows us that if we allow ourselves to act according to our principles, we become resilient, unbothered by others' opinions. Over time, Leo noticed a profound change in his interactions. When someone questioned his decisions, he no longer felt the need to justify himself. Instead, he calmly continued on his path, guided by his principles. This gave him a new level of inner peace, a feeling of stability that no external praise or criticism could shake. If you too wish to cultivate this resilience, begin by identifying the values most important to you. What do you stand for, regardless of what others might think? Let these values guide your actions. This practice of aligning with your core values can lead to a life of true fulfillment, one not swayed by fleeting opinions, but anchored in lasting integrity. This was only the beginning for Leo. By choosing his own path, he was learning to live with confidence in his decisions. But there were still more lessons ahead. For what happens when we face ridicule for these choices? The next principle reveals how to remain steady, even in the face of criticism, by understanding the true nature of reputation and approval. Principle 4. Regard reputation with indifference. As Leo continued to reshape his life around his values, he encountered an unexpected struggle, the battle with reputation. He noticed that people around him began to form opinions, often critical, about the new path he was following. Some thought he was foolish, others saw him as a dreamer, and some even expressed disappointment. This judgment stirred an uncomfortable feeling in Leo. Could he really live without caring about his reputation? Let's pause here. How much of your own life is influenced by how others perceive you? We live in a world where social approval is often mistaken for happiness, but Stoicism teaches us that true happiness lies within, not in the fleeting admiration of others. This is why Epictetus and Stoicism as a whole urges us to view reputation as something beyond our control, something we can and should regard with indifference. One day, Leo attended a gathering where a friend openly questioned his recent choices, even mocking him in front of others. Leo felt the familiar sting of embarrassment, but he reminded himself of Epictetus's words. Your worth is not determined by others' opinions, but by your own actions and character. Instead of feeling small or defeated, he simply smiled and said, "I'm following my path." The room fell silent, and though he could feel the weight of others' opinions, he chose not to let it burden him. Leo discovered that reputation is a fragile thing. It shifts like sand in the wind, impossible to grasp or control. He realized that if he lived for the approval of others, he would constantly be a prisoner to their changing opinions. But by releasing his need for approval, he could free himself from this invisible prison and live in alignment with his own truth. Here's something to consider. Do you seek validation in places where you'll never find true satisfaction? Think about the last time you acted a certain way just to gain social approval. Was the fleeting admiration worth the price of veering from your true self? Stoicism reminds us that reputation is beyond our control, and that it holds no real value when compared to the inner stability that comes from knowing yourself. Over time, Leo found this approach liberating. He became less concerned with what others thought, more focused on his values. The irony, of course, is that as he began to care less about his reputation, people around him started to notice his quiet confidence. Eventually, the same people who once mocked him began to respect his conviction, even if they didn't understand his choices. Leo saw this as a powerful affirmation of Stoic wisdom. When you live according to your principles, others' opinions hold less power over you. So, how would your life change if you could genuinely let go of your need for validation? Imagine the freedom that would come from no longer being at the mercy of shifting opinions, no longer seeking approval to feel whole. Leo's story teaches us that living in alignment with our values grants us an inner strength that reputation can never provide. With this lesson learned, Leo's confidence grew. But the road wasn't always easy. Sometimes others' judgments would still sting. And in these moments, he realized the importance of maintaining self-control and discipline, a practice that would help him withstand life's challenges without losing his peace. Principle 5. Exercise high self-control. As Leo began to disregard the opinions of others and focus on his own principles, he encountered another challenge: his own reactions. He noticed that, despite his progress, moments of anger or frustration would sometimes bubble up, threatening the calm he had been striving to cultivate. Have you ever felt that? Knowing you want to stay composed but feeling that inner flame ready to flare at the smallest spark? Stoicism teaches that true mastery over oneself comes through high self-control, a practice as challenging as it is transformative. One evening, Leo faced a situation that put his patience to the test. A close friend borrowed a treasured item from him, a book he held dear, and returned it damaged, as though it had been carelessly handled. Leo's initial reaction was shock, quickly followed by a surge of anger. He could feel his frustration rising, the words of reprimand forming on his tongue. After all, his friend had been irresponsible, hadn't he? But as he paused, Leo remembered one of the most valuable lessons in Stoicism. We cannot control the actions of others, but we can control our own responses. In that moment, Leo chose self-control over anger. He took a deep breath and reminded himself that his peace was more valuable than the temporary satisfaction of lashing out. He spoke to his friend with kindness, explaining the importance of the item to him. Surprisingly, his friend was deeply apologetic and even offered to replace the book. Leo's choice to control his reaction not only preserved his peace, but strengthened the bond with his friend. Here's a question to consider. How often do we let others' actions dictate our peace? Think of the last time someone's carelessness or thoughtlessness led to an argument or resentment. What would have happened if you had paused, chosen control over reaction, and responded with calmness instead of anger? Practicing self-control in these moments doesn't mean ignoring harm. It means handling it with grace and preserving your inner stability. Leo learned that anger and frustration are like thieves, stealing our inner peace and often leading to actions we later regret. When we let anger govern us, we give power over our emotions to others. Stoicism teaches that true freedom comes from mastering our reactions, turning away from the impulse to react immediately, and instead choosing a measured response. In time, Leo's practice of self-control extended to other areas of his life. When he encountered challenging situations at work or conflicts within his family, he would remind himself, "I am in control of my response." Consider this. What would your life look like if you embraced self-control as a daily practice? Imagine the clarity and strength you would gain, the freedom from being swept away by others' actions or careless words. Leo's experience reminds us that self-control is not about suppressing emotions. It's about choosing how and when to express them in ways that align with our principles. Each time Leo chose self-control, he felt a deeper sense of power, a quiet strength that did not depend on anyone else's behavior. But he knew there was more to learn. Sometimes, self-control also meant standing by his actions, regardless of how others might interpret them. And this brings us to the next principle: living with the courage to act according to our own understanding, even if it invites misunderstanding. Principle 6. Act according to your best judgment. As Leo grew more comfortable with self-control, he faced another test: standing by his actions, even when others misunderstood him. Have you ever made a decision that felt right to you, only to find others questioning or criticizing your choice? It can be a lonely feeling, can't it? Yet Stoicism teaches us that if we're truly acting in alignment with our principles and best judgment, then others' misunderstandings shouldn't disturb us. One day, Leo decided to decline a promotion at work. It was a tempting offer, one that came with a higher salary and more prestige. But the new role would demand so much of his time that it would compromise his health, his relationships, and his other interests, all things he valued deeply. Despite his firm reasons, his co-workers were baffled. Some thought he was foolish to pass up the opportunity, while others even suggested he was afraid of success. Leo felt the pressure of their judgments weighing on him, but he knew he had to remain true to himself. As he struggled with his decision, Leo turned to the wisdom of Stoicism. If you act according to your best judgment, the opinions of others hold no weight. Here's something to ponder. How often do we allow ourselves to be swayed by what others think is right for us, even when our intuition tells us otherwise? How many times have we sacrificed our own path just to fit into others' expectations? Stoicism teaches that if we live by our own best judgment, we free ourselves from the need to constantly please others or explain our choices. As Leo continued with his decision, he found that his life became more peaceful. No longer tethered to others' approval, he gained confidence in his own decisions, embracing the quiet strength that comes from trusting oneself. He discovered that true fulfillment doesn't come from meeting society's standards, but from aligning with our own values, even when the crowd doesn't understand. Over time, Leo's colleagues noticed that his commitment to his values made him someone to respect, even if they didn't always agree with him. His example showed them that integrity holds more value than external success, and that the courage to act according to one's best judgment often inspires more admiration than conformity. For Leo, this journey was a reminder that living authentically, even if misunderstood, brought a sense of peace that the approval of others could never provide. So, consider this. How much of your life is directed by others' expectations? What would it look like if you gave yourself permission to trust your best judgment and live according to it, regardless of whether others agree? Leo's story reminds us that when we free ourselves from the need for others' approval, we gain an inner freedom that no one can take away. As Leo's trust in himself deepened, he felt a greater sense of clarity and calm. Yet he understood that even with self-trust, others might still speak ill of him or misinterpret his actions. In learning to accept this reality, he found the key to the final Stoic principle, a principle that would help him maintain peace, even in the face of criticism and misunderstanding. Principle 7. No one can truly hurt you. Leo had come far in his journey of self-discovery through Stoicism, learning to guard his mind, exercise self-control, and live according to his values. Yet there was one last lesson that he needed to embrace fully, one that would allow him to reach a state of unshakable peace, the realization that no one could truly hurt him unless he allowed it. One day, a former friend made a harsh comment about Leo's life choices, dismissing his path as wasting potential and settling for less. The words stung at first, like tiny daggers poking at his sense of worth. The friendship had meant a lot to him, and he found himself wondering why someone who once cared about him would speak so harshly. But then he recalled one of Epictetus's most empowering teachings. No one can truly hurt you unless you allow their words or actions to control you. He thought to himself, if I allow these words to haunt me, I'm giving away my peace. But if I choose not to let them affect me, then I am free. Reflecting on this, Leo realized that his former friend's harsh words didn't define him or his choices. They were simply an expression of that person's own worldview, a perspective he didn't have to adopt. Here's a question for you to ponder. How often do we allow others' judgments, criticisms, or even compliments to dictate how we feel about ourselves? How many times do we give others the power to disrupt our inner peace? In Stoicism, the power lies within us to interpret and give meaning to what others say. Leo recognized that when someone judges or criticizes, they are acting according to their own understanding, their own standards, and their own limitations. And if their perspective was rooted in misunderstanding or negativity, why should he let it shape his sense of self? The next time he encountered criticism, Leo paused, took a deep breath, and reminded himself, this is their perspective, not mine. Only I know my true worth. Instead of reacting with anger or sadness, he chose patience. He responded politely, but he didn't carry their judgment with him, letting it float by like a passing cloud. In doing so, he felt a deep sense of freedom, a freedom from the need to defend himself or change who he was to fit someone else's view. Let's bring this to your own life. Think about the last time someone's words lingered with you, replaying over and over in your mind. How did it affect your peace, your mood, or even your actions? Imagine if, instead of reacting, you viewed these words as a reflection of the other person's perspective, not your reality. What would change? Stoicism teaches that when we stop letting others' opinions penetrate our peace, we become resilient, stronger, and more self-assured. For Leo, this was the final piece of the puzzle. He understood that he was the sole guardian of his inner peace, the only one who could grant or deny others the power to disturb it. No insult, no criticism, and no harsh judgment could reach him unless he opened the door and let it in. He had become, at last, unshakable. As you follow this journey with Leo, remember that this is not just his story. It's a path open to each of us. If you can see criticism as a mere expression of another's mind, let go of the need for validation and live with integrity. You will find a peace that cannot be taken away. You'll be free to live according to your own truth, unaffected by the fleeting judgments of others. Through these 7 principles of Stoicism, Leo transformed his life, building resilience, peace, and unshakable self-confidence. And now, the question lies with you. Are you ready to apply these principles to your own life, to free yourself from the weight of others' opinions, and to become unshakable? If this journey resonates with you, share your thoughts in the comments. Let's explore together how Stoicism can bring real change to our lives. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this with someone who could benefit from the wisdom of Stoicism. Thank you for joining us on this journey, and may you find strength, peace, and resilience on your own path.